Hi, everyone. This is Parker with the Interim Expert Team. This is our interview series, Tame the Change. We're here with Kana and Nick. And today our guest is Lani Rosales. She is the Chief Operating Officer at National News Network, the American Genius. She co-founded the Big Ass Social Happy Hour, Remote Digital Jobs, Austin Digital Jobs, and is a seasoned business writer and editorialist with a penchant for the irreverent. I will turn it over to her for a little introduction to herself.
That was a good introduction to myself. Thanks so much for having me, you guys. I'm really interested in today's topic, and I have been in the entrepreneurial world for a number of years, co-owned a business with my husband who founded the business, and during the workday is very much my boss and not so much my husband. But I have been traversing these waters for a long time, and especially through the tech world, through the Austin Digital Jobs. So I'm kind of swimming in the entrepreneurial and tech worlds, and that's me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So coming from like the point of view of the city of Austin, right? What do you feel is or are a few of the major challenges we're seeing as a city in the last year? And more specifically, what do you feel are challenges that maybe entrepreneurs are facing?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I think probably the most obvious answer is COVID has dramatically impacted. It's been one of the very few global events that's created a universal experience. No matter your socioeconomic background, there's almost nobody who's not impacted in any way by it. Austin has obviously been hit particularly hard because of being a large city and having a denser population. I live out in Williamson County, which is north of Austin. So we're a little bit further out. Gosh, I'm almost near Liberty Hill. So we're really far. We get to pass cattle on our way to the HEB. So that's nice. But in regards to business, I can speak particularly through the lens of the Austin Digital Jobs Group and the Remote Digital Jobs Group. They're both available on Facebook, and those have large and growing populations. And those groups are specifically dedicated to people that are looking for employment or looking to hire. So just really simple premise. And we have seen a huge spike in last year of job seekers. But what's wacky to me is I'm hearing employers and third-party recruiters particularly telling me that they're struggling to find the right candidates. And I'm sitting here like, oh my God, what are you talking about? There's like 50,000 sitting right here. Like, what is the problem? But it's the first time in a number of years that in the last month, I've started hearing that of saying like, we're struggling to find the right people. And the reason I bring that up is because what that tells me is that employment is waking up again. Budgets are still frozen for a lot of things like marketing, ad buys, and things of that nature, but the employment budget is slightly opening. And so that means that there's more opportunity growing, and it has really been difficult for anybody, whether you were unemployed, underemployed, or hoping to move jobs in the middle of a pandemic. But what has also changed that I think is really important is just the entire notion of what a workforce is, whether it's Austin or any city, wherein it used to be you have to come to this office or you're not a valuable employee. Employers suddenly see, oh my God, maybe we don't need this huge building. Like maybe we can offer flex work, because they've flirted with it for years, right? Of a lot of employers saying, well, you can have Friday work at home, or you can, some staff works from home, but remote work options are also opening up very widely. And Austin's a great place for that, because I think employers are a lot more willing, especially in the tech-centric environment that we have, to experiment. And so I think employment is a huge issue in Austin, but from what I'm seeing and hearing, I think that a lot of that is waking up, and a lot of entrepreneurs have gotten a little bit more back on their feet, especially with the second round of PPP. And so I think that we're seeing things wake up a little bit, and it's scary. Doesn't mean it's not scary, but there's that pent up energy. People want to find normal. None of us know what that is, but we're working towards it. And I'm seeing really positive signs of things actually, the wheels starting to move again.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? I'd
Please.
like to know, when you were saying that the employers are thinking that, we're not able to find the right people, what does that actually mean? Is that the right skill set, or, since we're remote now, it's not location necessarily. So what do you think that actually means?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I hear that, typically there's an employer that has a list of 10 things that they want a candidate to have, and they're finding candidates only have maybe 6 or 7 of those. And so it's just whatever their qualification criteria is. Sometimes it's years of experience, sometimes it's a particular certification, but in general, the more specific the role, the more difficult it is to find someone to fill. And I'm seeing really ultra, especially in the Marcom world, really ultra specific job titles emerging, where it used to have a digital media strategist or a social media strategist. It's an Instagram strategist, like full time, right? So finding somebody who's a social media strategist is a lot easier than finding somebody who is an Instagram expert, right? So that's kind of what the workforce is struggling with, is as we evolve in business and tech, our needs get more specific. So finding people with those specific skill sets is always a challenge.
Do you think that's mostly based on the fact that people are looking for more ROI when they're talking to people, instead of thinking about things in the long term, they're realizing everything is a lot more crunched? They need to make sure they're getting results.
Yeah, I do. And so anytime anybody's thinking about applying for a job, for those of us that own a business, we're bringing somebody on in any role, especially a small business. Every single person that you hire, you're looking at the full ROI of that person, right? It's not like a major corporation where, 10 people in the Austin office can underperform, no big deal. Oh my God, if you own a small business, if 10 people underperform, you're out of business. So yeah, I do think that, especially with the emergence of the entrepreneurial world kind of waking back up, and new opportunities of people that have created new businesses during the pandemic, being able to work remote, or servicing new niches like education, for example. I do think that the ROI is super important. And that's for any time, if somebody's job hunting, if you think like that, like what is the company going to get if I'm there instead of somebody else? What's the ROI of my talent as opposed to somebody else? Yeah, that's definitely true. But right now, as budgets continue to be really tight and frozen, yeah, that's definitely super critical.
Yeah.
Good question.
What changes are you seeing in terms of people being pushed out of jobs and into the market? And do you feel like Austin was affected as badly, or if not worse, than other cities?
I do think Austin was disproportionately impacted because I feel like the biggest employer is government in Austin, and the second largest is tech. And although it would seem like tech would be the easiest industry to convey to remote, they were very reluctant, right? And so I think getting people out of the physical office in the first place, I hate the word bullying, but it honestly took a lot of bullying. And our organization ran a running list of what companies were sending people home in the initial onslaught and who was keeping people in, right? And so that was kind of the taste that Austin was left with, was companies that were saying, well, it's not a coronacation. Pardon my French, but are you fucking kidding me? People are dying. You don't get to joke about that. Like, that's not funny in any way, shape, or form. But so I personally was really surprised, because tech tends to be a more progressive industry that is a little bit more flexible. And so I was really shocked that from the onset of everything, that there wasn't just let's make sure people don't die. Let's go ahead and send everybody home, and we'll figure this out as we go. But even in more progressive centers, that didn't happen. It took push. So from that point going forward, companies being nervous to lay off because the bad press, there's no way around it. But then having to lay off because, let's be honest, if you own a business and there's a pandemic, if you lose 40% of your sales in a year, you can't employ everybody. And that is tough. But of course, the sector most hard hit was hospitality and service. And Austin is still the music capital of the world. And so with so many people's livelihoods, whether it's them or their partner or their housemate or whatever it is, impacted so directly, with no hope in sight and still barely any hope in sight a year. Like, we all know that unemployment is real, but then you have an entire sector of people that are like, okay, now this is what I've been doing my whole life. Now what? And people just say, just pivot into something else. Like, go take an online course. Oh, okay. Then compete with everybody else in that sector looking for a job. So there's been a lot of that. But what I will say is that what I've seen in Austin as compared to a lot of other cities is the empathy gap has shrank much more substantially. So I think employers have a lot more empathy for what every single employee is going through, no matter the sector. And so that's been huge for connecting those dots for individuals that have, for, mostly, since the Industrial Revolution, traditionally been separated, by different layers. And now it kind of flattened where we all are because we're going through something together still.
Yeah, so there was a recent article that it basically said something to the effect that a lot of CEOs are thinking that EQ is a much more important factor now within their walls. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like there's a shift towards having that higher EQ?
So I do and I don't. And the reason that I do is I think it's important for leadership to have high EQ. And I think that the idea of what soft skills are required for a job right now are changing anyways. This is just kind of expedited things substantially. But for example, I'm on the board of the business school at St. Edward's University, and many of the meetings that we have is, how does a university put out an MBA student and make sure that they have the soft skills? They have the book knowledge. These people are brilliant. But then you put them in a job interview setting and it's like, what, are you serious? You went to, like, how are you even in the seat in front of me? How did this happen? And so I know that a lot of universities are really concerned with that. And when there's a shifting concern towards soft skills, that does include EQ, right? Like how to do like basic conflict resolution in the workplace, how to talk to other humans, how to adult, like that stuff. But I also want to say no, because I worry about marginalizing communities that are neurodivergent, that can't just like take a class and learn EQ, right? Like, so wherever we are on that spectrum of neurodivergence or being neurotypical, I think that impacts what EQ looks like in a workplace. And we have to be sure that we're sensitive to that as well, that we're not just marginalizing an entire group of people because they don't, they're not friendly like we are if they're, further in on the spectrum. So yes and no.
It's a good answer. Do you feel like a lot of people are feeling this pressure to over exaggerate and to say they can do things they can't just to compete in this environment? Like you mentioned that everybody's being told that they don't have all the skills because they need 20 skills for one job they normally wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical right now in American culture, period, right? There's all the, business influencers, and I won't name any because I'm sure they all have cults alongside them, but a lot of the business influencers talk about just, hustle and fake it till you make it. What? I can't fake a certification. Either I have it or I don't, right? So, but I do think that there's with kind of the fake nature of a lot of the business influencers and them only showing the wins and not the losses through their social media stories and whatnot. I think that a lot of people have a false perspective of reality, which is no matter how successful you are, no matter how financially or socially or whatever success looks like to you, there's always going to be bad days every single week. There is no like constant winning. It just doesn't exist. And so whether you're job hunting or you own a business or anywhere in between, I think there is a tremendous pressure on and a growing pressure on American culture to have certain check marks, to appear a certain way. And every culture has that, but I think ours is right now kind of hyper vigilant, and I'm finding more and more people feel imposter syndrome. And that's something that 10 years ago, when I would ask people, A, most people didn't know what it was, but B, didn't really identify with that. But now I don't know a whole lot of adults that don't. And the ones that don't, I'm sure you've heard the Dunning-Kruger effect is usually I'm going to say it in like the most crude terms, like the dumbest person in the room thinks they're the smartest, right? But on the converse of that is typically the smartest person in the room doesn't realize they're the smartest person in the room, because you have to have a certain level of intelligence to know you don't know everything, right? And so a lot of us are walking around with imposter syndrome, like, oh shit, I'm going to get discovered any minute. Y'all are all going to find out I'm a fraud and I'm going to have to go move to another country and get offline.
Exactly. I feel like the biggest red flag I see in any sort of interview situation is when somebody comes in and can't think of their weakness, right? Or is not willing to admit something online and show a softer side, because it shows that there's a lack of self-awareness and this desperation to try and prove something.
Yeah, we're moving almost towards like the Japanese culture of like overworking, to where like if you haven't napped at your desk in front of your boss, you haven't worked hard enough. Like if you're not dying from working, and I feel like as a culture we're moving too close to that, and that's not healthy for anybody.
No, it's definitely not. Do you think that there's going to be a lot more of a push towards certifications and kind of metrics to prove that people can do their job both to themselves and to the companies because of this kind of culture?
I do, and I actually think for that instance, I think it's a good thing, because even though I said I'm on the advisory board at a business school, I don't have an MBA and I'm not going to.
Right.
I already have advanced far enough in my business that, I may do it later, but I wish I could undo and hook 'em horns. I love my education at UT, but I mean, did it really get me where I am right now? No, I did that on my own and begged for help and didn't get it. And so certifications are so important, because it also allows in marginalized communities that typically can't just like chunk off 100 grand worth of debt, right? And so it's a good and a bad thing. It's bad because we're always chasing the next, like, oh no, there's another certification, there's another course, but it also does allow more people to have a seat at the table. And I like the way you put it, metrics to be able to see if an employee has what they're saying they have, right? So now it's no longer, with that mentality, that growing mentality, it's no longer about fake it till you make it. It's just don't fake it, just go make it, and you can do it. I like that.
Yeah.
I know that in the last year, especially, we've seen how blurry the lines can get between work and personal life, with work from home culture and remote work being kind of 100% of what everyone's doing. And I know that there's kind of quiet chatter that's growing in volume about the idea of a 4-day work week, right? And they've embraced that. I think in one of the Nordic countries across the pond. What are your thoughts on that in general? Just kind of the idea of burnout, and where we go from here with some of these issues being illuminated with remote work.
Yeah, I love that question. That's a really great question. So I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'll try to boil them down. First is that studies over the years have found that workers in an office setting tend to get about 3 hours of work done a day, like actual focus work. But you're in the office for 8 days. So what do? Like, you're watching Netflix, you're earning your MBA, like you're fucking off talking to somebody over there. Like there's not a lot of work done in an office environment anyway. So yeah, I think a lot of people have found that there's a lot of productivity. There's been experimentation with the 4-day work week for quite some time. There was a recent study with German startups, and many of them moved to an 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. workday, finding that was really the only zone of productivity, that after 1, like nobody's really doing anything, and in an office setting. But when you're a remote worker, you can't ask yourself, you usually close out the day saying, oh my God, where did the time go? Whereas in an office setting, you can tell yourself the time went to the office, I'm done. Like, so you compartmentalize differently when there's a remote option. What I think we'll see is a lot of companies in all sectors, all cities, all environments, experimenting in ways where it's possible. There are some jobs, obviously, you cannot work remotely, so it's not even a possibility. But for desk jobs, I think you'll see a lot of experimentation. What I don't think we'll see, and what I wish we would see, is individualized experimentation. I, as a worker, tend to work a lot faster and much more productively at a desk than a lot of people. And I'm an introvert, so I don't need to be in the office talking to people. Like, that's totally fine for me to like skip that part. But I do know that some other people, say, for example, we have staff writers. I know that with one same assignment, one staff writer might spend 3 hours on it. Somebody else may spend 45 minutes to an hour, just based on how they work. I don't think we'll see individualized experimentation, but I really hope employers will consider, instead of saying everybody works from home on Friday, or the marketing team can work remotely, but the IT team can't, or lumping people together. I really hope that, especially smaller businesses can do a little bit more experimentation. I don't think we'll see it. I hope we do, but I think that it's just kind of like hiring. Sometimes people will hire a parent who has said, okay, I would like to work from home after 2 so that I can be there for all the things or whatever. And a lot of employers have said, okay. So I think if employers think of things more holistically and individualize what a workforce looks like, I think that more productivity would exist, honestly, I believe. But I'm being wishful there.
I think that's a great point. One thing that I always think is funny, because I've heard you say it before, is that you're an introvert, right? You are so active online. Do you feel like this new remote culture is going to help create situations where introverts are more able to network and find opportunities? Because I know you have both online and in-person events.
Yeah, we do. So it's hard. Yeah, I think introverts have thrived pretty well through working from home. I have a sweet neighbor who is down the street. We moved in October out to the boonies, which I love. And we have a neighbor down the street, and I can tell she's an extrovert, and I think she might literally be dying, because if she sees another human walking, it doesn't matter who it is. She's like, okay, I gotta go. I gotta take a walk now and see that person. And I love her for that. And I think that's so amazing. I'm not on that spectrum. Most of the time, if I see somebody, I'm like, I got to go inside and do something. And like, I disappear, and I probably come across as unfriendly, but I'm maxed out. But I think that it does create opportunity. But the remote situation has been really excruciating for some people who are extremely extroverted to a point to where like it hurts them to not be around other people, which again, I can't really understand that, but I can see the flowers wilting. And so a hybrid situation's got to exist in the future for sure.
I realized I'm on mute, of course. So how do you think that, kind of to sum things up, because we're coming up on time here, what do you think are the best ways that people can kind of embrace the change that's happening and move forward? Both employers and employees.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what's about to happen, particularly in Texas, because Governor Abbott changed everything to 100% open, is you're going to start seeing a couple of employers with big buildings push everyone to come back, no exceptions. And it doesn't matter who that first employer is, they're going to be blasted, they're going to get bad PR, it's going to be terrible, everyone's going to hate them forever until the next generation is born. That's just the way it's going to be. And then another company is going to come behind them and do the same, and they'll be blasted and they'll be hated. And the third will come and they'll be blasted and maybe not hated so much. So we're about to see like this rolling wave of hatred as like things reopen, and like kind of seeing who's first. Like, for example, I keep seeing on TV these ads for the Texas Spa Expo. And I'm like, why the hell do people need to go stand together and look at spas right now? Like, you can order them online, or like, I don't need to like be in a hot, but it's happening, right? And there aren't restrictions. Like, yeah, you're supposed to wear a mask, but they're not limiting number of people. That's their business. They have to sell tickets to that, right? And so I will probably never buy a hot tub now. Not that I was going to, but now I'm like, hey, fuck them for like trying to fill an expo center, right? Yeah. But the next one that does it, I'll be annoyed with. And the one after that, I'll be like, okay, well, I guess this is how it is now, right? So my thoughts are, no matter whether you own a business or whether you're trying to go back to normal, which doesn't exist anymore, but like find some like in-person situation, if you're first, second, or third, you're screwed. I mean, you're going to be the bane of everyone's hatred. It doesn't matter their political affiliation. It doesn't matter where they're from. You're in trouble. And so my advice is to let somebody else be the first, second, or third. And that's what we're doing. We have several offline events. And so, for example, we have the Austin Digital Jobs Mixer every quarter, and that's like 500 or 600 people in a room. I can't in good conscience put 500 or 600 people in a room now, even if it is legal, right? And I'm also not going to find a partner that's willing to do that anyways. And so, we desperately want to have in-person events, not just because I miss everybody and I didn't know that I would miss people, but I do kind of miss like just the vibe. I don't actually want to talk a whole lot to people, but the vibe of being around a lot of people is kind of cool. But so my advice would be, to just be patient. But even when you're looking at those certain things that roll out, somebody's going to have to be the first to do all the things, to call employees back, to have an in-person event. If you're on the team, you got to make decisions. If your company is forcing you to go back and you are not interested in going back, keep your resume fresh, start looking. But if you have to go back, you have to go back. And that's scary and that sucks. But blasting your employer is not going to keep you employed. And if you own a business and you're in the first, second, or third wave of, individuals in your niche that are doing things in person, you're going to get blasted. So we're waiting to be the fourth and fifth. We're just waiting for somebody else to take the hit, honestly. And I know that's selfish, but that's the way it is. We're going to be able to do in person eventually, but we got blasted for canceling events in February and January of last year. My husband's immunocompromised, so we were already on top of it, and he has left the house twice since December of 2019, and that is once to move, because we moved, and second to get his first vaccine. And so we take it very seriously, but we got a ton of hate mail from people because we canceled January and February, and then we were just like, hey, we're on hiatus until whenever. And I think that actually might have been a blessing for us because we were very conscious because someone in this house is immunocompromised. Maybe we wouldn't have been as sensitive. Maybe we would have lost our business because we would have been like, no, we're doing it anyways. But we were some of the first, and boy, we were in that wave of the first, second, and third, and we got a lot of hate, but it was worth it.
Well, good for you guys for calling that shot in the earlier days of all of this. Did either of you, Nick or Kana, have any other questions for Lani while we're still here?
I mean, I could talk forever. I have so many questions.
I have time if you want to do more questions. We can splice them on in.
I think really the main wrap-up question for me, at least, was just, it was really interesting when you were talking about how, people are saying imposter syndrome a lot more. I felt like it was something that was always around in the background for all this time, and the whole fake it till you make it thing, I never resonated with that. So I was really happy to hear you say that. For people who want to be competitive, knowing what's going on and knowing that they might want to change roles here soon for whatever reason, how then do they become more marketable, more competitive when we see that these job postings are very specific, or is the answer like the certifications or whatever? What can people do to have a little bit more security and maybe a foundation to be, competitive?
Yeah, so the primary security is making a move that's close to what you already do. And the reason I say that is because it's much easier to go from a social media strategist to an Instagram strategist, right? But it's much more difficult to go from bioengineer to Instagram expert, right? It doesn't mean you're dumb, right? You're a bioengineer, but a lot of people pivot, and Austin is, I love Austin, but what happens is much like what happened in Hollywood. People pack up their bags and they move out to Hollywood and they're like, I'm going to be a star. What happens is people pack up their bags and they move to Austin and they're like, I'm going to work in tech. Okay, good luck. But if you're moving from really strengthening your foundation of what you're already doing, unless you're trying to move out and pivot to something else, which is totally acceptable and super normal. But if you can stay, especially for the next year, where your current skill set is, strengthening those and looking at the person ahead of you, your manager, whoever you answer to directly, what certifications they have? Why don't you have them? Take their job. Just kidding, don't take their job. But whoever's right ahead of you, that's your next step up. Look at what people with their job title in the industry and your location, what certifications do they have listed on their LinkedIn? What are they doing? What kind of courses are they taking? That's really helpful. Also networking at whatever they're networking at, right? Marketing people enjoy Creative Mornings, for example, or Women Communicators of Austin, or anything like that. But getting ultra specific with where you network is another huge key portion of job hunting, or even just advancing your career in your current job.
I love what you're saying there, because I feel like kind of throughout this, you've really leaned into the idea of people just need to start being more authentic, right? You really need to hone in on the skills you have. You need to hire people who have the skills that they actually have, that they actually have shown some results on, and stop trying to pretend you're something else, right? Like there's already so many people, like everybody wants to be in marketing, everybody wants to be in tech. It's like,
Sure.
well, this isn't the time to change. This is the time to specify and make sure you're really good at what you do.
But I would say that stereotypically, and I'm going to use a stereotype,
Yes.
openly stereotype. Men traditionally will look at a job listing and see bullet points. And if they meet, 40 or 50% of them, they apply.
Yep.
Women stereotypically, not all women, but as a stereotype, women will look at it and say, oh, I don't have all those, and just move on.
Right.
Because they don't meet 100%. So if you meet at least half of them, do it, because you don't know what one or two things from that list are the must-haves and what are the wish list. And so even if you are pivoting, making a lateral move, moving up, specifying whatever you're doing, whether you're identifying as male or female, think like a stereotypical dude.
Yes, I've seen that study actually. It's wild to me because I think the other thing is that women actually will take the time to get those other bullet points in their repertoire, right? Like that's the difference there.
And that's a lot of pressure, because what if one on the list is you need a PhD? Well, okay, I got to go get a PhD now.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe people don't have to go that far, but it's more, people talk too much about the pivot and that they think that means like going into a completely different direction, when it's really a pivot. Even in a dance move is just, you're turning your foot slightly, right? Like you're moving your body slightly and just going in a slightly different direction.
I love it. That's accurate.
Yeah, I absolutely love this interview. I think you really nailed it and kind of where our direction's going here. So is there anything that you have coming up or ways that you want people to get involved with American Genius or with the Austin Digital Jobs or remote jobs or any of these things? Because you're everywhere on the internet, which I love.
Well, you don't have to worry about Bash right now because Big Ass Social Happy Hour is on hiatus, so you don't have to do anything there. The American Genius has a subscribe, pretty much any page you go to, and that will send it to your email every day at like 3 a.m. So that's fun, and that's free. Also, if you're on Facebook, or if you're not and you want to go back just for this one reason, which a lot of people only use Facebook for this, and I'm not even kidding, look up Austin Digital Jobs or Remote Digital Jobs and join those groups. And they're shenanigans. And if you don't like cuss words, you are not going to like those groups because they're wild. It's the wild, wild west. But we'd love to see everybody there on those groups active, even if you're just considering one of those moves.
Absolutely. And we've looked for candidates there before, to be honest, and it's a great resource. And there's so many fun memes that you put out that are very relatable, and I just absolutely love. So it's a good community.
Memes are a growing love language. So
yeah, especially for introverts, it's like, yeah, I can put this out there, and you know what I mean. You know I love you.
You get me.
Well, thank you so much, Lani. We really, really appreciate this, and I'm sure that so many people out there will find something enriching out of this video and your expertise and your advice. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I think we all did pretty well, and I don't think any of us are going to get hate mail from this episode.
I hope not. I don't think so either.
We'll see.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.